Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction, Julian. So before I start, I would like to say thank you to a couple of people. So Léa Morin, Marie-Pierre Boutier, Alice Safi, Ahmed Bouanani, whose work was very much instrumental, and without their help, this lecture wouldn't have happened. I also would like to thank you for coming tonight in great numbers to hear me talk. This is the first time I do something like this alone, so bear with me. I think I'm just gonna launch right into it. So as Julian mentioned, today's talk is focused specifically on two films, which is La Longue Journée, or The Breadwinner, Luqmat al-Aish, by Mohamed Abbazi, 1969, and Sidi Ahmed Moussa by Ahmed Bouanani, 1972. Both films are unfinished and were censored. I will start with a little bit of an introduction of where the idea came for this lecture performance, and then I will start talking a little bit more in detail about the history of the making of these two films. So I first came across Abbazi's film a couple years ago when I was doing research for my project, Dhakira Collective, which Julian mentioned. And I quickly grew obsessed with the story of its making and wanted to, like, its disappearance and later reappearance. And obviously I wanted to watch the film, but couldn't really watch it. So that only made me want to find it more. I found the only way I could watch it was by reading about it, about the history of it. And then I found an account of its making, shooting, production, and subsequent loss, which was gathered by researcher Marie-Pierre Boutier, as the film was often labeled as lost. And the deeper I dug, the more items I found. I found a couple of stills from the film, some pictures on set, a brief video of the rushes of the film. And it wasn't actually until last winter that I was able to watch the film in full when my dear friend, film curator and researcher Léa Morin sent me the unedited rushes via Dropbox link, which I will be sharing some of the excerpts of with you tonight. So the idea behind this lecture performance came from this curiosity and also questioning of how can I show this film that is technically unfinished and also the other one that doesn't exist. So it's honestly kind of just like an excuse for me to show the film as well, because I can't really show 40 minutes of soundless footage. So I was trying to think of and reimagine other ways I can screen the film. So this is what I came up with. So the second part of the lecture will be dedicated to another unfinished film by Ahmed Bouanani. The choice behind the inclusion of this particular film was very obvious, since Ahmed Bouanani, like Abbazi, represents an emblematic figure of Moroccan cinema, whose career was also marked by constant censorship attacks and stands as a testament and an example on how to counter the limitations imposed by the state. His unfinished film, which I will be talking about today, Sidi Ahmed Moussa, is particularly relevant to my research of what an Amazigh cinema would look like in Morocco, as the film would have explored the life and trajectory of 15th century spiritual master and Amazigh Sufi poet Sidi Ahmed Moussa. So I'll start by talking a little bit, setting the context for who Mohamed Abbazi is and how he came to make the film La Longue Journée. So I will share some images first. Should I hit play on this? I guess. Okay, perfect. So Abbazi represents sort of an atypical figure in the landscape of Moroccan cinema for several reasons. The first one is that he comes from a very modest background. He was born in Khmissat, the northern town of Khmissat, in 1938. For those unfamiliar with the territory of Morocco, it's a city that is situated between Meknes and Rabat. and is the home of the Zimur tribes, also known as Eid Zimur, which are historically renowned for their great fighting spirit. Their men have often been described as having a taste for battle, and Mohamed Abbazi is no exception. He is the son of an Amazigh soldier, actually, from the Zimur tribe. He studied filmmaking at UCLA. So this is another very unique aspect of his trajectory, because if you're unfamiliar with the history of post-colonial African cinema, most of the filmmakers actually benefited from film scholarships in Soviet countries. So a lot of our filmmakers in Morocco, for example, went to the Lodz Institute in Poland, and where was it? And Dhakira in Russia. So this is, I think, to my knowledge, he's probably the only one of his generation to have pursued his studies in the US, as opposed to Poland, Russia, or as France. So his time in the US would prove to be very formative, as he was a contemporary of the Whites uprising, and studied against the backdrop of the continuing civil rights movement and the escalating Vietnam War. Furthermore, he studied at UCLA, so he graduated just a few years before the LA Rebellion film student movement started. If you're unfamiliar with the movement, it was created by a collective of Black filmmakers in the US, specifically in California, who wanted to create a unique cinematic landscape characterized by a utopian vision of a better society, an identification with liberation movements of the Third World, and an expression of Black pride and dignity as an alternative to the images that were being produced by Hollywood at the time. So, like I said, that his time in the US and his education in the 60s imbued him with a sensitivity to post-colonial issues and specifically the demands of ethnic minorities. And it also informed and shaped the singularity of his thematic and formal approach to filmmaking and the strategies he will later develop to translate those concerns into cinema when he returns to Morocco. Actually, the origin of the film La Longue Journée can be traced back to his student film that he made for his graduation called Kid Johnny, which was shot in 1966 in a Los Angeles ghetto. Like I said, the fact that Abbazi chose to pursue his studies in America is nothing short of atypical. At the time of a freshly independent post-colonial Africa, and in the wake of and amidst the Cold War, Soviet Russia and Poland quickly became a hub for international students from Africa, Latin America, Middle East, as they benefited from film scholarships and received diplomas from prestigious institutes such as the Gerasimov Institute of Cinematography, VGIG, in Moscow, Russia, and the Lodz Film School in Poland. To name a few, for example, in this picture, we have Moroccan filmmakers Karim Idris, Abdelkader Al-Qta, Aziz Sayed. Aziz Sayed is actually a painter at the Lodz Institute, and the picture was taken by Abdelkarim Darqawi, brother of Mustafa Darqawi, and also filmmaker, DOP. So there's just a few names that came out of the Lodz Institute. For the VGIG, we had the pioneer of Sudanese cinema, Suleiman Mohamed Ibrahim al-Noor, and Syrian filmmakers Mohamed Malas and Osama Mohamed. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, and if you don't know, the VGIG is very prestigious. Some of its notable alumna are Andrei Tarkovsky, Sergei Parajanov, and we had one outlier in the history of Moroccan cinema that actually pursued his studies in Russia, and that is Mohamed Abul Waqar, which I think I have a picture of, right here on the set of his graduate film, The Killers, 1978. He also pursued his studies in Russia, but for painting more than filmmaking and acting. This is a picture of Didier Ould Nana, a Mauritanian student in the cinematography department of the VGIG. So I'll just move to the next one. Yes. So yes, so he went to the U.S., pursued an education in film, and then decided to return to Morocco following his graduation. Like a lot of filmmakers who pursued their studies in Europe or in the West in general, like Ahmed Bouanani, for example, when he came back to Morocco, he felt the need to and the desire to know his homeland better and to anchor his cinema in an ancestral heritage. This concern with Amazigh history and culture and the desire to document and valorize its population and traditions was very obvious in the case of Abbazi, as he comes from an Amazigh background. More broadly, it was also due to a belief that he had that documenting Amazigh people's traditions and their values could shed light on the socio-political reality of Morocco as a whole. For example, touching on topics such as the rural exodus, the illiteracy, women's rights, and children's rights as well, and thought that traditional Amazigh values could also serve as models for the whole country. So upon his return to Morocco, he would submit a project proposal to the CCM, Centre Cinématographique Marocain. That project would be the screenplay for La Longue Journée, The Breadwinner, the film which I am talking about tonight. The film was supposed to be a documentary dedicated to the daily lives of young Amazigh cleaning ladies who arrived in Casablanca in the wake of the rural exodus in the late 60s. It was set out to film a young woman from the Carrière Centrale slums in Casablanca as she ventures out every day to downtown Casablanca looking for work as a cleaner on the outskirts of Marché du Centre-Ville. Abbazi was immediately refused permission to shoot by the CCM, as was expected. The odds were definitely stacked against the project in many ways. Although the CCM cited Abbazi's decision to let the women speak in their native tongue, Tamazight, as the primary reason behind this rejection. Although the fact that he wanted to set the film in the Casablanca slums, the fact that the film's explicit portrayal of the social and sexual inequalities at the time, I'm sure, constituted highly undesirable narratives for the authorities at the time, who wanted to project a different image of Morocco. To set the setting politically in Morocco at the time, we are 4 years after the violent repression in Casablanca, 1965, of a high school demonstration that turned into a proletarian riot, leading to a radicalization of the left-wing opposition. In this context, filming Casablanca from a social or even political angle is obviously very suspect. Furthermore, the city is patrolled by the forces of law and order, which you will see in the clips that I will share, as the country had been in a state of exception since 1965. So filming the misery, also the prostitution in particular, and the slums was definitely very problematic for the CCM directors. Last but not least, Abbazi also planned to listen to these women express themselves in their mother tongue, which is also his own Tamazight. So we are in the midst of national construction and consolidation at this time in 1969 in Morocco, where most supporters of independence were advocating for Arabization. And the country was a long way from recognizing the Amazigh part of Moroccan culture and Tamazight even as Morocco's third national language until 2011 as part of the new constitution. At the time, films were shot in classical Arabic, possibly French, and Amazigh history and culture only made it on the screen within the strict confines of the most innocuous folklorism. It's also important to understand that the CCM's ban on filming and shooting is basically sort of a death sentence to the film. It's condemning it to not exist because without permission from the CCM, he could not only not shoot the film, but it also made it harder to obtain aid, financing, technical support, and above all, a distribution license for the film. Abbazi went ahead and shot the film, even without the permission. He resorted to clandestine shooting and hoped that once the film was done and edited, he could secure some sort of international distribution. And in this mission, he was sort of supported by his network by an international network comprising mostly of his partner at the time, Donna Wolf, her sister, so his sister-in-law, Susan Wolf. Just show an image. Okay, I think that's perfect. So in the characters of these rural colonial ladies and the city of Casablanca as a whole, Abbazi found the perfect playground to illustrate the post-colonial racial and social inequalities that continue to exist in independent Morocco without even needing to film the misery of the slums. When looking at the surviving images of La Longue Journée, one comes face to face with this reality. We see striking images of the cleaning ladies tediously waiting on the sidewalks, dressed in shades of gray and brown, their faces usually covered by a gray or black veil. These images are then juxtaposed with those of affluent foreign women in their colorful dresses who tower over them from their cars or their hurried walk. A stark contrast between the rural, urban, and the social. The cleaning ladies are also seen being harassed by men, be that street vendors or military men which were patrolling the streets at the time. So I'll be sharing a first clip. I think I have to go through the whole thing to get out of this one.
جينا بعيد ورجلوحة فينا ماشي بلا مواعيد وكل هذاك أنا
So Abbazi also very quickly chose an actress, Khadija, which you will see in the footage that I will share right after, who embodied these housekeepers seeking daily employment. He spotted herself as she made the daily trudge from her slums to downtown Casablanca in search of work. Abbazi doesn't pay her back, but nevertheless tries to offer her something in return for the time she devotes to him and the customers she potentially loses in the process. He finds her a permanent position as housekeeper for a couple of friends, temporarily lifting her out of the precariousness of day labor. So we'll be showing a second clip. I think this is the right one.
السلامة يا بحري أهدك يضت الدرتي تبانا كي تميثري أهد تزرد دخامي مليدا يا بحري أبكي ثمرة والراوي أترون نار صفر في الليل السلف سني مصوني
Khadija character. So a question that comes up is how was Abbazi finally able to actually shoot this film after all the information that I've just shared about how about the high surveillance at the time of the years of Laj and in a city teeming with informants. According to the compte rendu that was done by Marie-Pierre Bautier and her interviews with Mohamed Abbazi, this can be attributed to his singular strategy. First, by creating an atmosphere of complicity with the forces of law and order, as well as with the neighborhood characters, that was built on a common origin and language, but not based on interests. Abbazi recounts how he took advantage of his Amazighness to obtain, if not the protection, then at least the benevolence of the forces of law and order. More precisely, the militaries that were present in the city at the time. Historically, the forces of law and order were held by Amazighs. This is a quote from Abbazi. I spoke with the soldiers in Amazigh. We'd get on well together, and in the end, they'd say to me, "You do what you want." There was a certain complicity. I explained the subject of the film to them and to everyone else in the vicinity. They know they were being filmed. In another interview with Marie-Pierre Bautier, Abbazi also recounts that his recording device was in a basket, enabling him to record the women's dialogues au naturel. Quote, I had a basket, he gestures to his feet, where I carried the tape recorder. I'd sit next to them and let them talk. I didn't say anything. They forgot I was there. They talked about everything. Women sitting around, waiting to be hired, talking. You discover a whole word. I was part of the decor. Additionally, he also mobilized a multinational team, which I had mentioned above, namely his partner Donna Wolf, which was the co-author and scriptwriter for the film, and his sister-in-law, Suzanne Wolf, which was the on-set photographer. I will show maybe some, yeah. So, this is an example of some on-set photography that was taken by Suzanne Wolf for the film. These are from black and white rushes of the film. These are other shots as well of the street vendors. So, yeah, the team was able to secure the shoot mainly because Susan Wolf and Donna Wolf, being American women and blonde, carrying a camera, they kind of looked like tourists, so it was fine, and they also helped distract the locals. Above all, they were also the daughters of the U.S. consul in Casablanca, so that also provided another layer of protection. Although Abbazi says that they never had to, run recourse to that, which proved the effectiveness of his other strategies. So go back a little bit here. So yeah, thanks to this very stealth and unique shooting strategy, he was able to actually shoot and finish the film. He later on went to produce a series of 4 commissioned documentaries for US and Danish television. He took on these projects primarily because he wanted to raise money for the editing of La Longue Journée. The productions, although low budget and largely improvised, gave Abbazi the opportunity and freedom to film his community and their rituals, especially in a lot of the remote areas in Morocco. On these productions, Abbazi took the role of a cameraman, co-producer, and co-director in conjunction with his team, his usual team of Donna Wolf as scriptwriter, and also who traveled with him to Denmark to assist with the editing, and her sister Susan, who took some images on set. So this is from Trois Mois de Vacances from 1970, shot in Erfo Dressani. And there is another one, a wedding scene in Tunfit from the shooting of L'Arrangement, 1970. All images by Suzanne Wolf on set. So 70s, he's doing these productions, trying to raise money to edit the film. Then came 1971, 1972, two military coups against King Hassan II. Abbazi coming from a military family, and his child, and like I mentioned, his father being an Amazigh soldier, meant that his childhood friends and his family were indicted, and he was under suspicion. So he immediately fled back to Berkeley, California, where he joined his partner, Donna Wolf. He settled there for 3 years and took the time to rework his film, the reels of which he took with him, as the annotations on the color end-to-end film are dated 1971, and one reel is presumed to be black and white working copy from 1972. Soon after, Abbazi and Wolf would part ways due to both creative and personal differences, as the latter became involved in the media and then American diplomacy, while the former found it impossible to fit in and felt the need to move back to Morocco. He said, "I thought the Moroccans needed me more." So Abbazi left the United States for good, sometime between 1975 and 1977. And just before that, he entrusted the rushes of La Longue Journée to the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive, the PFA, where they stayed there until early 2016. They, seen as they were a private deposit, the reels were not listed in the PFA database, but they were found by chance by an archivist from the institution during the move of the reels, of the funds. Almost immediately, Donna Wolf and her sister Susan viewed them, and the process of digitalizing the tapes was launched. And that's where the rushes I showed you come from. I will show you one last clip, but before that, I'll just say a little bit about it. So, as pointed out by Marie-Pierre Boutier, the film is a historic document in two respects. On the one hand, it includes the absolutely unique images in Moroccan cinematography of this era of Islam, the Carrière Centrale. This slum is the oldest in Africa. It is now destroyed. It also gave the name in Darija to the word slum, which is Karian, which comes from Carrière. So the film can be read as a variable passage, a dissection of socio-spatial hierarchies of a large post-colonial city, from the ghetto to the big villa via the bourgeois town. And the second reason it's that it could be considered a historic document is because it includes a very rare image of the 1969 street exhibition organized by the artist professors of the Casablanca Art School in Place du 16 Novembre. So a little bit about that. In 1969, Casablanca Art School artist professors organized the Présence Plastique exhibition, a protest against the state-organized Salon du Printemps, a colonial relic that considered Moroccan artists' work naive. As part of this protest exhibition, they staged paintings and murals in public squares, first in Jemaa el-Fna in Marrakech, and then in Place du 16 Novembre in Casablanca. This nomadic exhibition also traveled to two high schools in Casablanca in 1971, reaching a next-generation audience. It became a defining moment in Moroccan art history, including work by Mohamed Attallah, Mustafa Hafid, Mohamed Hamidi, Mohamed Mlihi, Mohamed Shiba. There's a lot of Mohameds. There's a colonial joke there, but I won't go there. Farid Belqahia as well, I believe. So I'll show the clip. I guess I can't talk while it's playing, but here, I'll just do this one. So in the image you see here, this is of a cinema. The marquee reads Pour une poignée de diamants, which is a 1968 thriller by, and it's not here anymore. I don't know where I put it. I think his name is... Oop, sorry. I just need to find... Oh yeah, I have it. Okay, perfect. Yeah, it's a 1968 thriller by Ernesto Gastaldi, starring Brad Harris, among others. And the alternative title was Cheers to Cyanide, which I just thought was kind of funny. This is a cinema that goes by a different name now. It used to be Cinema Al-Hurriya, Cinema Liberté. Built in 1954, I believe, by French architect Albert Planck. The cinema is located at the intersection of not art and technology, but Rue Rahal Mskini and Boulevard en Janvier. And I would like to give a shout out to my mom for giving me that information. I sent her a video last night, and she sent me a voice message this morning to tell me that, yes, that's what the cinema is called and where it is. And I will play the clip. You will see the exhibition as the character of Khadija walks down the street. So I will also show another clip because this scene was later repurposed by Moroccan filmmaker Ali Safi in his 2020 documentary Before the Dying of the Light, which is an archival deep dive and tribute to the vibrant visual art scene of 1970s Morocco, also known as the Years of Lad. So, like I mentioned, the 1970s in Morocco were marked by severe police crackdowns on dissent. And Safi's documentary is sort of focused on the story of Aziz, a 23-year-old activist who dreams of freedom and democracy, who lived under an assumed identity for 2 years before he was identified and arrested. While making the film, Safi came face to face with the fact that there was no way to show the sort of Moroccan political repression of the 70s with images, because there was no images of that except for the propaganda that was produced by the state. So in order to fill in the gaps, he decided to substitute the missing pictures with images of often censored films from Moroccan cinema of the same period, following the montage techniques of Ahmed Bouanani. And in so doing, he pays tribute to the foundational practice of Ahmed Bouanani and reestablishes a possibility for the intergenerational transmission of culture, and extends Bouanani's search for a cinema whose forms are capable of reactivating traditional oral practices. So I'll show the clip from Before the Dying of the Light, which brings us full circle to Ahmed Bouanani, which is the next film. I think I have to do the same thing again.
يعني انت عامل واحد العطاء في حياتك كبير، خرجتي من الدائره الاجتماعيه ومن دائره الفعل وجيتي لواحد الوضعيه اللي ما فيها والو، ما كاين غنى ثقافي، ما كاين انا اللي كنخطف حصه السينما في الاسبوع، لان ما نقدرش نتخلى عليها، لا السياسه ولا غير السياسه، يحكموني ولا ما يحكموني، ما يمكنش نستغنى على السينما.
So yeah, that's the scene. He also repurposes different scenes from films by Mustafa Darqawi, Mohamed Rikab, Ahmed Bouanani, Mohamed Bouwaqar, and of course Mohamed Abbazi's film La Longue Journée. And I think it's actually a great example of how to give a new life to these archives. So I will go into the second film now, the Sidi Ahmed Moussa. So for this one, it's particularly challenging because there's actually no rushes, no reels, no footage, nothing, except for like some photos on set and some archives of the script. But what I thought of is maybe walking you through a little bit of like the history of Ahmed Bouanani, his role in Moroccan cinema at the time, and sort of the obstacles he faced throughout his career. I will show some interviews with him that were conducted by his daughter Touda Bouanani and Ali Safi. And for the last portion of this, I will do sort of an exercise of trying to create the film with footage that he shot and also using Amazigh oral history and folk tales. So we'll see how that goes. The first thing, I think I should remove this. I keep forgetting I have to do it every time. Okay. So Ahmed Bouanani, also born in 1938, and passed away, unfortunately, in 2011, was a major figure in Moroccan intellectual and artistic life. He was a poet, an artist, a writer, a historian, a filmmaker, an editor, a true Renaissance man. He defended a practice of the arts that paid no heed to hierarchies between genres. In his all-encompassing vision of the artist's craft, all Ahmed Bouanani's disciplines feed off one another, driven by a holistic project, which was reinventing collective practices and forms, whether that be editing, soundtrack, dreaming, and in so doing, acting as a transmitter of heritage and memory, specifically Amazigh heritage. So his work dealt with the artist's responsibility in the face of the disintegration of collective memory in an age that only promises amnesia and the death of dreams. Bouanani's solution to this was not to just preserve memory, but to reconstitute it beyond its pitfalls and to create new meaning from scattered fragments. The image that you see here is from his book Enquête sur les bijoux Amazigh, which is a book that included drawings reproduced from 1963 and 1964. So at the time, Ahmed Bouanani was 25 years old. He had just returned from a 2-year stint in Paris, during which he trained in cinema at l'IDEC. He would soon join the CCM, the Moroccan Cinematographic Center, where he would spend a long career as an editor and archivist. But just before that, he joined the Institut National des Arts Traditionnels et du Théâtre, l'INAT, directed by Mariam Aherdan, and was placed under the auspices of a very unique ministry, which was in charge of information, tourism, crafts, and fine arts. His work consisted of crisscrossing Morocco to observe, film, and report on traditional arts, customs, dances, and crafts in different regions of the country, kind of like how Abbazi did with his commissioned television projects. Unfortunately, today, INAT is largely forgotten, and so are its film archives. although Ahmed Bouanani's boxes contain, in his house, in his archives in Rabat, contain a few traces, summary notes on headed paper, drafts of studies on tattoos, folktales, proverbs, songs and dances, and for the purpose of this book, on traditional jewelry designs. I will be showing a few clips. The first one is Ahmed Bouanani talking about his time with the Inat and why he joined them and what he had hoped to gain from that experience. And another one will be showing sort of the drawings and illustrations I talked about, which were in his archives, in his house, and are part of Archive Bouanani right now. Both clips are from Crossing the Seventh Gate, also by Ali Safi, which is a documentary about Ahmed Bouanani and his career. So let's see, we have Inat.
Mohamed est allé à Paris pour me rencontrer. Et elle m'a dit, est-ce que tu veux travailler dans mon institut? C'était pour moi une aubaine. Pourquoi? Parce que ça allait me permettre de connaître le Maroc mieux que personne. On a mené des enquêtes dans toutes les tribus. Les plus reculés et tout, Tazarine. Ça m'a beaucoup aidé dans mes travaux.
C'était le premier contact avec le... Enfin, c'était le premier travail d'exploration des arts populaires à Sylvain.
Oui. Hein? On a voulu créer l'école des arts populaires. On nous a fait... On nous a dit, allez-vous-en.
Et ça a duré donc 2 ans.
Et on est parti.
Ça a duré 2 ans la collaboration avec ce...
Oui, enfin, si on veut. Puis on est parti. C'est dommage. Vraiment, c'est une chose que je regrette. Il aurait fallu insister et lutter. Oh, on était jeunes,
Et il y avait des tas de choses à faire encore. De tout.
Oh, il y avait tout à faire. Tout. Malheureusement, on était seuls. Après, on était les... C'est terrible quand on est seul. Tu ne peux rien faire. Rien.
So the next clip is from his archives showing the drawings and illustrations I mentioned previously. I don't know if I have to click on it again.
Voici les lieux, voici les hommes, voici le chant. Élargissez le cercle, que Dieu élargisse vos tombes. Que béni soit le poète et le conteur. Que notre chant soit digne de ceux qui nous écoutent.
Je n'ai pas appris dans le livre sacré. Je ne commande ni aux montagnes, ni aux collines. Mais je sais où naissent les sources.
So, like with Abbazi, whose film La Longue Journée had its inception in his graduate film Kid Johnny, with the unfinished film, the never realized film Sidi Ahmed Moussa, Bouanani had a sort of precursor to this film, which was Tarfaya ou La Marche d'un Poète, which came out in 1966. To illustrate, I will just show maybe a small clip. I don't know how long this one is. It's also touching on similar themes of popular poetry and folk tales and Amazigh heritage and history. So I'll just play this.
Ceci est l'histoire d'un enfant qui possédait le don merveilleux de la poésie et du chant. Cet enfant s'appelait Khaled. Son existence fut auréolée de légendes et de mythes, comme tous ceux qui burent à la source bénéfique et reçurent des génies des grottes la sagesse de la musique et de la parole. J'ai largement reçu le don d'aimer. Vous tous qui m'entourez, écoutez ma parole. Je viens à vous du fond des âges. Que vous importe qui je suis, d'où je viens. Mon enfance, pareille à toutes les enfances. Comme vous, j'ai conquis les continents fabuleux, les palais d'émeraude. Comme vous, j'ai cueilli les pommes d'or et les fleurs magiques plus belles que l'eau. Je n'ai pas appris dans les livres sacrés. Je ne commande ni aux montagnes, ni aux collines. Mais je sais où naissent les sources.
So the clip I showed was from Trfaya ou la marche d'un poète from 1966. A couple years later, in 1972, Bouanani would begin work on the film Sidi Ahmed Moussa. What would have been the filmmaker's first film in color would instead remain unfinished due to lack of support from the CCM, the Centre Cinématographique Marocain. A docufiction that retraced the trajectory of the long-forgotten 15th century spiritual master and Sufi poet who led armies in the war against the Portuguese colonization of the Moroccan coast. Following the liberation of the territories in question, Sidi Ahmed Moussa refused to hold any form of power, returning to his sanctuary and pursuing his studies, teaching, and contemplation. This is from the third issue of Moroccan sociopolitical journal Anfas Sufi, published in 1966. In it, Ahmed Bouanani penned a passionate and comprehensive study of Amazigh Moroccan oral literature, which had mention of Sidi Ahmed Moussa. I'll read from an excerpt. In the olden day, itinerant singers such as acrobats of Wulad Mohamed Moussa and his storytellers would crisscross the whole country. They were especially numerous in the Middle Atlas range and even more so in the Souss. Their orchestras were composed of 4 players: the Amghar or Emediazin, chief of the troupe, the Bouranim or flute player, dressed in a colorful ensemble, and 2 tambourinists in accompaniment. In the Souss, itinerant singers occasionally traveled alone or with a child, but more often it was larger troupes that circulated among the towns and villages, improvising poetic songs in their own fashion or chanting in the most famous poems of their chief. These wandering singers earned an important place in the struggle against colonial forces at the beginning of the century, as well as under the protectorate. Today, writes Bassett, it is these troops, these orchestras in barbaric costume, always on the move from village to village, who spread the most extraordinary sounds among the rebellious regions and agitate for struggle against the French. They are admired and listened to. They are formidable agents of propaganda. So, as mentioned in the text, Sidi Ahmed Moussa is widely associated with the tradition of acrobats and wandering singers and storytellers. This forms sort of the background of the interest Ahmed Bouanani had in shooting this film, and particularly focusing on the story of the Sufi poet Sidi Ahmed Moussa. So he set out to the southern region of Morocco where the poet had actually lived, along with his crew, which included Mohamed Sqat, who was on camera duty, to shoot the film using a cast of mainly non-professional actors selected from the local population. I will show some pictures on set from courtesy of Archive Bouanani, which I encourage you to explore their website. It's a treasure trove. If you're interested in Moroccan cinema or like North African cinema in general, there's everything there from photos to letters, scripts. I think I have some here. Yeah. This is the manuscript for Sidi Ahmed Moussa by Ahmed Bouanani. And this is some of the scenes. And this is the script typed into a typescript. Sorry, I had something else. Yeah, this is a quote from the budget, the total budget of the film, and it's stamped by the Centre Cinématographique Marocain and signed 1972 for release of the funds. So in 1974, in an interview with Noordin Saïl, Bouanani stated that the film was not interested in simply valorizing the poet's mystic thought, but was rather preoccupied with creating the grim atmosphere of his century. He said, "These were the times of deep Moroccan tragedy, perpetual struggle against Portuguese and Spanish conquerors, food shortages, epidemics, heavy taxation, confused philosophical thought, and a stifled national economy. From that economic and social misery, and from that misery of thought, the maraboutic movement was born. Sidi Ahmed Moussa was one of the great marabouts of Tazrawalt. There's an immense mythology around him. He was also, and above all, a leader of the peasant resistance against Portuguese invaders. Unfortunately, no written document explaining his political role under the Saadi dynasty exists. For people today, his name is intimately linked to acrobats. Nothing could be more false. Additionally, Bouanani was also attracted to the project because it mirrored the state of affairs of 70s Morocco, a country still alienated by colonialism and its corollary perversion of certain customs and tradition. According to the script, the film opens with a coastal village massacre and then gets lost in the maze of a crazy mythology of despair. We're living today in a similar state of great distress, and it's not a coincidence that we've been witness for some time to a renaissance of Sufi brotherhoods. Even today in so-called popular music, the lyrics are defeatist. The call to resignation or for patience has never constituted a revolutionary act. The public hears, but doesn't listen closely enough. So he shot the film, and then after had to show it, obviously, to the censors at the CCM. They took one glance at the rushes and completely rejected the project. Their excuse was that there was a disparity between everyday people taking part in the film and the model of the ideal Moroccan. Bouanani attempted to renegotiate and re-edit the film, but unfortunately the reels were abandoned in a laboratory in France where they were supposed to be developed, and the film was condemned to non-existence. As Ali Safi notes, what had in reality unsettled the censors in Bouanani's attempt to foreground a heroic figure from the country's history that had been expunged from the official annals. Sidi Ahmed Moussa would have been the first film to celebrate Morocco's Amazigh heritage. By extolling such a figure, the film would have run counter to the official version of history. Unfortunately, by that time, in mid-70s, Ahmed Bouanani had already become the target of several censorship crackdowns, which ended in the destruction of some of his work, as well as a banishment to the editing room of the CCM. Unfortunately for the censors, in that very basement of the CCM, he would hone his editing skills, which he later employed as an armor to smuggle his vision under the noses of one-track mind censors. I will show two clips where Ahmed Bouanani talks about these two experiences, specifically working with the CCM, the censorship attacks, and his career as an editor. So we'll start. I think this is the one.
Pour eux, les archives, ça ne doit pas exister. Il ne faut pas qu'il y ait une mémoire. Ils avaient peur tout le temps de la mémoire. Résultat, tu prends d'une façon générale le Maroc. Le Maroc n'a d'existence réelle qu'avec le retour de Mohamed V. Avant Mohamed V, il n'y avait rien. Tu prends toutes les archives maintenant et il n'y a que ça. Dès que tu touches à un sujet tabou, comme la guerre du Rif, tu deviens très louche. Tu deviens un fouille merde.
So in the clip that I'm about to show, he talks about an experience where he was sent by the CCM to shoot a documentary, and then the documentary was immediately banned.
Et en 63, quand tu es revenu, tu es tout de suite rentré au CCA?
Oui, ben, il fallait vivre. Et on m'a envoyé faire un film sur Émile Jules. C'était mon premier film interdit. Quand je suis allé là-bas, j'ai filmé ce que je voyais, et non ce que je voulais voir. Non. Et ce que je voyais, c'était uniquement des militaires armés de mitraillettes, avec un peuple silencieux en train de danser, de faire le folklore et tout le bazar. Et moi, je filmais les militaires en train de regarder. C'était terrifiant comme truc, ça m'a dégoûté. Ah ben, ils n'ont pas aimé. César n'était pas content.
C'était qui à l'époque, César?
Hein?
C'était qui à l'époque, César?
Renem. Et Hassan II, bien sûr. En fait, il n'y avait que Hassan II. Mais tout le monde interdisait en son nom, alors que lui n'est même pas au courant. Je suis sûr qu'il n'aurait pas fait ça. Il était plus intelligent que tous ces crapauds.
I love that Bouanani's idea of insult is very also fairy tale-esque. He's just thinking of toads. This is a clip where he talks about how he was sort of relegated to the editing room of the CCM and how he developed his editing technique while there. I have to click on the thing again.
Moi, à 14, j'étais... Parce que la salle de projection était en bas de l'ancien CCM. Et c'est là où la censure... j'étais convoqué tous les jours. Pourquoi tu as fait ça? Pourquoi tu as fait ça? Pourquoi ça? Même un film comme Ousma, c'est moi qu'on convoqué, c'est pas Hamid Bouanani. Ils m'ont censuré le premier plan. Je ne savais même pas pourquoi, alors que moi je filmais Bab Mansour. Tu vois, avec la place et tout. Eh bien non, en bas de l'image, il y avait des cireurs que je n'ai même pas vus. Alors c'est à cause de ça qu'on m'a... Mais ça m'a permis la censure, ça m'a permis d'utiliser toutes les armes du montage. Tu sais, c'est terrible. Des vieux l'enterrement qui gueulent avec des bouches édentées et tout ça. On m'a dit, alors que pour moi, ils étaient beaux. Il y avait 3 ou 4 plans. Je les ai changés de place. Et on m'a dit, voilà, c'est comme ça qu'il faut. Je n'avais rien à enlever.
So all clips that I've shown are from the documentary by Ali Safi called Crossing the Seventh Gate. So that brings me to sort of the oral history exercise, where I will be showing some clips in the background and reading from translated Amazigh folk tales about Sidi Ahmed Moussa and Amazigh poems as well. I'll show you the original in the background. I don't know if we can do both. I don't think so. So this is from a song about Sidi Ahmed Moussa, recorded by Jean Podard, the officier des affaires indigènes, who was stationed in Tanalt, a village south of Agadir, in the 40s of the 20th century. So we have the version in Tashilhit and then the translation. Another example of a song, this time in Tiznit, 100 kilometers south of Agadir. The song was recorded in March 1990 by the 72-year-old Rais Bouchra Assou. And then I think I could start the excerpt. Yes, okay. So this is the first one. Maybe I'll look a little larger so you can see it. This is the original story about Sidi Ahmed Moussa. And it says Sidi Ahmed Moussa was an acrobat. The original in Tashilhit, I will be reading the English translation, but I would like to set it with some footage from Bouanani's work. Let's see. I think this is the one. Sidi Ahmed Moussa was very naughty in his youth. They say that he did not have any respect for people older than himself. One who does not respect elders is not taken seriously. This Sidi Ahmed Moussa roamed around the world. Then one day, he and some acrobats arrived in a village. They found a man there who was busy drawing water from a well by means of several leather water bags. He called them, saying, "Please, O archers, help me carry these leather water bags to my beast of burden." The archers said to Sidi Ahmed Moussa, "Come on, help him." They only did this to mock this man, poor fellow. Sidi Ahmed Moussa came, lifted the man's leather water bags, at the same time piercing them with a needle. Water started to flow out, and the acrobats started to laugh. This is really what they were looking for. They also met an old lady on the road carrying a basket full of figs. She said to them, "Please carry this basket up this hill for me." The acrobats said again to Sidi Ahmed Moussa, "Carry this basket up for this old lady." They only wanted to have some fun again. He carried the basket to the top of the hill, and this time he remained sensible and pleased the old lady. When he had climbed that hill for her, the old lady said to him, "Go, my son, and may God bless you and bless your future actions." After that, he came back down to his companions and decided to devote his life to God. So in the translated fragments that I will be reading from, a lot of themes and motifs about Sidi Ahmed Moussa emerge, mostly that he was very much a wild boy in a group of adolescents, sometimes also referred to as a group of acrobats. He always carried his rifle with him. There's various confrontations with phenomena from the cosmos. He helps angels pull the sun. He hangs his knapsack on a star. He gets a glimpse of heaven and the divine throne. He meets Bahmut. He meets a giant snake whose tears make a river flow. He wants to have children who must invoke the divine mercy for him, and therefore he sends people away to find him a proper wife. I will be reading a second fragment of a story. This time it's called the story of how Sidi Ahmed Moussa in the cave of the man-eater. I'll be maybe showing, yes. So this is the original in Tashilhit, and I will be reading it to another clip from footage also shot by Ahmed Bouanani in the past. I'll just fix this one. Two people, Sidi Ahmed Moussa and his friend, roamed around the world. They then arrived at the end of the world. So they hung their knapsack containing their provisions on a star. The star then disappeared with their knapsack. The two men started to quarrel. Then someone appeared who said to them, "What is wrong with you?" They said to him, "We lost a knapsack with our provisions." The man said to them, "Don't argue about that. The knapsack will come back to this place. Sleep here, and tomorrow morning you will have it back." So they spent the night there, and then the next morning it came back. They got the knapsack again. Nothing was missing. They went on and wanted to spend the night with a person who turned out to be an ogre, a man-eater. They asked him for hospitality, and the ogre said to them, "Welcome." He made them enter the cave where he lived with his enormous herd. He lit a fire for them and said, "What do you want to eat?" They said to him, "Whatever you want to give us." He said to them, "Let me give you some meat, then you must give me some other meat." The men looked at one another and said, "Where would we find other meat?" They discussed the matter and then said, "Let us eat first, and then God will bring us an answer to your question." When they had eaten, the ogre said to them, "Have you eaten?" They said to him, "Yes." He then said to them, "As for me, I have not yet eaten." He then said to them, "Give me one of you to eat." They said to him, "All right, let us draw lots, who of us it will be." They drew lots, and it was Sidi Ahmed Musa who was to be eaten by the ogre. His friend said to him, "Oh no, he must eat me." Sidi Ahmed Musa said, "Oh no, I will be the one who is eaten by the ogre." When the ogre prepared himself to eat him, Sidi Ahmed Musa took an iron rod, put it into the fire until it was hot, and then stabbed it into the one and only eye that the ogre had, and stirred the rod in his eye. The ogre took out the eye from pain and could no longer see. He said to them, "All right, you try inside the cave, and I am here at the entrance. We will meet tomorrow morning." In the morning, Sidi Ahmed Musa and his friends slaughtered a sheep and put its hide over both of them. They ate one sheep and they left the other one, having covered themselves with hides. They went among the sheep. The sheep were about to go out. Sitting at the entrance of the cave, the ogre counted them. He took all of them in his hands and then pushed them out of the cave until all the sheep had gone out. Sidi Ahmed Musa and his friend had gone out also, hidden among the sheep. Outside in the open, they took their sheepskins off and hid the ogre with them, saying, "This is what a guest does after he has spent the night with a hateful host." They fled and left the ogre behind. Now I will be reading the last one, which is a poem about Sidi Ahmed Musa. This is the original in Tashlihit, and it will be set to another footage by Ahmed Bouanani. This one was published by Justina. In the name of God, I will tell you a story of a man whose name went over the world. Sidi Ahmed Musa did not have a zawiya, nor did he possess a mosque. He simply joined a troupe. He was nothing but an acrobat. He simply joined a troupe. Wherever there was a wedding, he brought along his tambourine. Wherever there was a big group of visitors at a wedding, he brought along a rifle. Wherever he spent the night, wherever he spent the day, wherever he went, on the day God wanted to bestow favors on him, he confronted him with a great woman saint who carried her stick. The troupe of acrobats that had joined Sidi Ahmed Musa approached her. The old lady said, "O sons, have pity on me and take this big basket of figs up the hill for me." They all talked proudly. No one wanted to carry the big basket for her, nor the sticky basket to touch their clothes. She then called Sidi Ahmed Musa. He said, "Yes, she who believes in God may surely expect hope from him." He went to her and stood in front of her. She said to him, "My son, please carry this big basket for me and let us climb that big slope." He said, "In the name of God," and he threw the tambourine from his hands. He rolled a piece of cloth around his head on which he carried the basket. The juices of ripe figs dripped down his face, and he carried the basket uphill. She then said to him, "O brother, a reward is guaranteed for you." He looked up. He could see heaven. He could see the divine throne and someone who was sitting on it. Sidi Ahmed Musa, release your pledge, so that I may use to hit the jealous person who spreads scandal about me, whether to be a chief or a qaid or nothing at all. So that was the exercise of trying to imagine, sort of, since there is no footage of the film, of what the film could have been. So to finish it off, I will bring it back full circle again to another film, Moroccan film from the 80s this time, by Mohamed Smihi, in which he portrays a Riffian acrobat who witnesses the French defeat. The film is 44, or Tales of the Night. This is a very rare, I think maybe the only on-screen appearance for Smihi, where in a cheeky scene, he is dressed in a red silk pants and shirt, which are typical of the Moroccan acrobats called Wulad Sidi Ahmed Musa. And he is witnessing sort of the departure of French soldiers from the village. Can't get it. And the last clip I will show. So today, the surviving traces left by the poet Sidi Ahmed Musa in collective memory in Morocco are often invoked in folk songs and stories, and of course in his Wulad, the famous acrobats who perform in Jamal Hafna in Marrakesh. And I will be showing some clips that show examples of those acrobatic performances. And one last one. I think that's the exact same one. Oh, maybe it's just one clip actually. See? So actually, I think that was the whole clip. So yeah, that is the end of the lecture. If you have any questions or comments that you would like, interventions, anything, this is the time for that. I don't know if I missed anything.
Thank you, Bouchra, for this. My question, it's kind of a bit personal because I know you and you can choose to answer this or not, but would you ever see yourself or maybe give this responsibility or task to anybody else of continuing or this reconstruction of, for example, Ahmed Bouanani's unfinished film. Is that something, you know, like talking about archives, etc., and ontology, is that meant to just be a haunting experience, or should it be something of a mission to be continued and finished?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, it could be both. But I think like that's why I chose the specific clips from Ali Safi, because I think he represents sort of a perfect example of that. He's a disciple of Ahmed Bouanani. He also studied in France, and when he came back to Morocco, felt that his film education lacked a representation of Moroccan cinema, and then he started researching and was extremely angry at the fact that none of these films were made available and that there was no education whatsoever, and beyond that, that there was no efforts of preserving those films and that history. And his solution, or at least his attempt, was to go out and seek out Ahmed Bouanani, make it a documentary about him, and then furthermore also helped found Archive Bouanani, which carries on its work until today, which all the images have shown are because they digitized those photographs from his house. He has incredible archives. He has insane stuff that like still to this day has not been made readily available for lack of like funding or like people who are like willing to work on it. But he sort of also reimagines a way to give new life to those films in a lot of his work, namely Before the Dying of the Light, where he repurposes a lot of those clips. And I think he carries on also the legacy of Ahmed Bouanani in that way, specifically in the sense that of like the focus on the transmission of oral practices. But yeah, I think everybody who's part of Archive Bouanani is actually doing that work. Léa Morat, Marie-Pierre Boutier, Ali Safi, Touda Bouanani, obviously. And a lot of the emerging Moroccan filmmakers right now too have that sensibility as well to those works and to the Moroccan film archives.
That's very true, but do you think you have a desire of merging that into your own artistic practice?
For me personally?
Maybe less in a documentary style and more in a maybe creative?
Yeah, I would say yeah, but I wouldn't know where to start. But maybe that's for summer, this summer. Something to think about. Yeah, I think like he said, there's a lot to be done still. And it can be daunting, but it can also be exciting.
Thank you.
You mentioned that Mohamed Abbasi's work he had the foresight to donate it to the archives at Berkeley, and that's why we still have his work. Is that like too simplistic an explanation of why?
Yeah.
Is there a sort of, you mentioned that a lot of these Moroccan filmmakers were on scholarships, so is there the potential that there may be a lot of other undiscovered cinema in those same archives? Unfortunately, mainly in America, or is there others in Europe?
I think in the case of America, maybe not really, but in Europe, yes, there's a lot. And in the Lurch Institute, they still have the archives of all of the student films that the filmmakers made as part of their graduation project. But there's, De quelques événements sans signification, Mustafa Darqawi's film from the 70s, which was restored in 2019, I want to say, by Léa Morat, was found also by chance in an archive in Spain, because at the time it screened once in, I think, Moroccan Film Festival, and then Mustafa Darqawi clued on that to the fact that it will be banned and possibly destroyed, so he smuggled the reels to Europe, and then they stayed in the archives for years until somebody found them by chance. And you hear these stories sort of like all the time right now. But yeah, I would be curious to see if there's anything in America besides like Abbazi's work because again, I find that like extremely fascinating that he went to the US. I think he's the only one who did it at the time, especially coming from such a small town and landing there. Apparently he got a scholarship to study economy, but was also a Amazigh teacher at the time in the US, which is incredible. And then he went to UCLA because he was always fascinated by film and decided to study there. But I think a lot of these things make sense because it was like the 60s. But yeah.
It's gonna be a bit niche, but this is the first time I see the cover both in English and in Arabic of les bougies, les bijoux, bougies. Dyslexic in real time. Les bijoux Amazigh. Au genre, in Arabic it says in Morocco, but in English it doesn't say, or in French. Enquête sur les bijoux Amazigh, mais ça dit pas au Maroc. En arabe, ça dit au Maroc. Ce qui me pousse à me poser la question, which pushes me to ask the question. Je suis vraiment ouais. I'm gonna try. I'm gonna do my best to finish this sentence. Is there actually a difference between like other countries and other spaces?
Yeah,
Okay.
There's a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of differences. And I think Ariella Aisha Azoulay released a book recently also documenting the history of Amazigh jewelry in Algeria specifically. But yeah, it's definitely just in Morocco, from village to village is completely different. So you can imagine outside, and then if you count in like the Canary Islands and like Libya, Egypt, there's a lot. Yeah,
because this is is one of the unmade movies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't even know anything at all, but like it would be interesting to find maybe like notes or whatever.
Well,
I don't know if you.
There is, like I mentioned, if you go to Archive Bouanani's website, they have files per film by Ahmed Bouanani and also other Moroccan filmmakers. So if you search Sidi Ahmed Moussa, you will find everything from like scripts, research documents that Ahmed Bouanani wrote specifically during his writing of the script, photos on set, like financial documents from the CCM about the budget of the film, and also from the laboratory in France where he deposited the film reels to be edited. There's a lot of documents. It's just there's no film, unfortunately.
Anybody else?
Oui. Yeah, I did that. Yeah. I just thought it would be a bit weird to show a silent, like 6-minute long video. That would help. I chose. There was like a Kabyle jazz band, and then there was Les Frères Maigri and Ahmed Malik at the last one. Yeah. No, I did that. I took the liberty of doing that. But actually, that brings me to an important thing about the film, because after obviously the rushes were digitized, the film obviously cannot be shown because the sound reel is gone. But it has been shown in different contexts, such as like Ciné Concert, where a lot of Amazigh musicians were invited to perform a soundtrack to the film while the film was shown in the background. I think a rapper also was invited for that. And it was shown at Hay Mohammadi, where the slums were also to the kids of the neighborhood and apparently it was a great experience for everybody. And I think it meant a lot also to the filmmaker to have a new generation see the film. All of that was done again by Léa Morin through l'Observatoire in Casablanca. Yeah. Shout out to Beit Zuhal for that one. Yeah.
I have a question. I thought one of my favorite moments of this talk was surrounding this cinema in Casablanca, and how you came at it from so many different angles, including showing us the clip of it first, then showing a clip of it in a different film, this Before the Dying of the Light film, and then having this sort of triangle made with your mum, who was explaining to you things about this cinema, like last night, and just seeing this like one tiny little piece of footage be sort of spread around people's lives, which made me think about what it's like for you kind of living with this footage and living with a lot of footage, because I know that you do this a lot. I was struck by this moment when you said in relation to Before the Dying of the Light that you felt like it was a good example of giving new life to these archives, this idea of new life. In this talk, we've seen so many versions of how to give new life, and I know that in your archival practice, there's so much life-giving and new iterations of things. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about the way you think about, I guess, giving new life with these images, which of course depends on the image, depends on the context, but a little more about the way you think about that kind of encounter and that newness, I guess, from the old.
Yeah, that's a great question. I was actually thinking about this recently because I took a class about how to create from film archives, and we were given an exercise where I used some of the footage from La Longue Journée. Yeah, I don't know. So far what I thought of, I think I come at it always from like a textual background, because I think that's also how I experienced a lot of these films, was often just by reading about them because I couldn't find them or watch them. But I would also love to work with something like sort of like what Safi's doing, but specifically with not necessarily these film archives, but sort of snippets of dimensions of Morocco in Western media, which I find extremely fascinating and very funny, because it's always shown in this weird, like, exotic way. And I found myself, like, always bombarded with mentions of Morocco, even when I'm watching something that has nothing to do with Morocco. So I'd be interested to explore something like that while bringing those two elements together. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm thinking about that a lot. I haven't come up with anything else better than this, the lecture performance, but maybe something else in the future.
Anyone else? Can I bring you a microphone? Would you like any specific feedback, by the way, Bouchra? Was
Yes.
that also something you were looking for?
Yes, please. This is the first time I do this. So. Thank you. That was actually kind of the problem for me preparing for this, because it felt like every time I pull a thread, more stuff comes out, and there's so much to talk about and so many things and this is just like talking about Morocco. Like, we could do a whole other thing about Amazigh Cinema in Algeria, but thankfully we have Frédéric Deveau Yahi, who already wrote something incredible, which this was very important for me doing the research on this. But I think more than this, I think we should I'm trying to find ways to show the films, because I think that's the best way also to talk about Amazigh Cinema, is to actually circulate those images. So stay tuned for that.
Well, thank you so much, Bouchra.
Thank you. I have some reading materials if you want to like browse stuff that I've used for the research